And welcome to the first ever video recording of the Country Podcast. We're really excited. It's going to be put up on YouTube. It's going to be put up on some other places. Who knows? But we'll let you know. Lot going on today. The UAW is about to strike against the three major American auto manufacturers, not named Tesla. And the CIA has come out with some interesting info about the lab leak theory. But we begin today with the impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden's potential business dealings with his son. There's no evidence, according to many on the left and in the media, tying Joe to this corruption. In fact, I just watched a video with Speaker McCarthy, and an AP reporter first asked a question and said, "Hey, do you think we should be doing this inquiry with no evidence?" And he ran her through what I'm about to run you through as well. So, after surviving 244 years with only 2 presidential impeachments, it looks like the country will experience its third in less than 4 years. The political brawls in Washington seem to have escalated to regular occurrences of this type of cage match. 2 sides enter, 1 man leaves. It's a common theme, it seems, lately, and it's a comment on the broken nature of our political machinations. An indictment of our methods of choosing candidates, the political power the 2 national parties wield, and the woeful job the quote-unquote free press performs to vet candidates. Just think of how Joe Biden was vetted in 2019 and 2020 and what we're dealing with now. So yesterday, Speaker McCarthy announced, actually it was 2 days ago now, without a vote, that the House will take up an impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden's alleged corruption while he served as vice president, the details of which have emerged since the eve of his election, which is quite interesting. Watching CNN or MSNBC, a person would be hard-pressed to understand why this impeachment inquiry is moving forward. It seems that 95% of the coverage of this topic is focused on Republicans, while the other 5% is dedicated to some form of, quote, there is no evidence linking the president to Hunter Biden's business dealings. The White House has been similarly adamant that there is no evidence, although the actual language employed by the communications team has changed significantly. From Joe Biden has never spoken to his son about his overseas business dealings, which is clearly untrue, to the president was never in business with his son, which is probably also untrue. Alarmingly, Joe Biden, in order to convince the American people he was not corrupt, lied directly to them in the presidential debate of 2020, repeating his lie that he never spoke to his son about his business in Ukraine. It was debunked as a lie at the time. If you go to thecountry.news, you'll see that CNN debunked this at the time based upon Hunter's own testimony. And yet the national media ignored the story, as they overwhelmingly continue to do. Indeed, the White House, congressional Democrats, and many in the mainstream media nonetheless continue to maintain there is no evidence linking the president to his son's businesses. So let facts be submitted to a candid world. 2 different business partners have contested Joe Biden's statements on his dealings with Hunter's foreign business partners. These are Hunter's business partners contesting Joe Biden's statements. Tony Bobulinski, who you may remember from just before the election, he appeared on Tucker, he testified, I believe in Congress. C-SPAN definitely ran a video, which we've also linked to on thecountry.news. His statement. So he's a former Navy lieutenant. He's a former business partner of Hunter Biden, and he stated unequivocally that he has discussed Hunter's business with Joe. And he witnessed firsthand Joe discussing it with Hunter and about a Chinese oil company deal with the Chinese company is called CEFC. Now, that deal never took place, but nonetheless, he's clearly involved in Hunter's business dealings. Okay. The second partner was Devin Archer, who testified more recently to some acclaim, who said he's another longtime Hunter business partner, and he told Tucker Carlson in an interview that Burisma hired Hunter to send signals to D.C. to keep Burisma alive. Burisma was an oil company in Ukraine. I don't even know if it's around anymore, but it apparently was about to fail. It's extremely corrupt, and Hunter Biden serving on the board served to, in addition to some other things, keep that company afloat. Devon Archer also directly refuted the president and the White House to inform Congress that Joe Biden spoke often with Hunter's business partners in Ukraine and elsewhere. And the next claim from Dan Goldman, who seems to be the new Adam Schiff of the Democratic Congressional Caucus, said, "Oh, they just talked about the weather." Oh yeah. Bunch of high-paid millionaires and executives gather in a conference room with Hunter Biden to get Joe Biden on the phone to talk about the weather. That's what we're supposed to believe. And then despite Devon Archer's linguistic gymnastics in his testimony, he claimed that Hunter sold the illusion of access, which, it's hard to say what that difference is between access and the illusion of access, except you're committing fraud is basically the excuse. We're fraudulently pretending that you have access when you don't. It makes no sense. But despite that, the record clearly shows that Hunter's business partners had real access to Joe, including deal makers from Mexico, Ukraine, China, Russia, and Kazakhstan. And again, we'll put the article in the notes or somewhere you can find it. You can find it at thecountry.news. There's links to all of that. Speaking of Russia, Hunter Biden allegedly received a wire of $3.5 million from the wife of a Russian oligarch. And that oligarch is also the former mayor of Moscow, who was impeached due to, you guessed it, corruption. And the Biden administration recently sanctioned Russian oligarchs, vis-a-vis the Ukraine war and oil. And this particular oligarch who allegedly sent that payment was not sanctioned. In addition, Hunter Biden regularly flew with the Vice President Joe Biden to meet with foreign business interests on Air Force Two. They traveled together to meet in at least 14 countries. Next, the FBI has an informant. They have a form called an FD 1023, which is the documentation of an informant's testimony. So that's real evidence, obviously. And this informant claims Burisma, and particularly the CEO of Burisma, told him that Burisma hired Hunter on their board in order to gain access to the vice president, which is obvious, right? Why else would you pay this idiot $80,000 a month unless you were expecting access to the vice president? Paid the Bidens for that access, but then paid an additional $10 million, $5 million for Joe and $5 million for Hunter, for the specific purpose of removing a prosecutor. His name's Viktor Shokin, who was then subsequently removed from office by Joe Biden personally. In fact, he's famously admitted, we can link you to the video, that he extorted Ukraine to fire Shokin. In fact, we're going to show you the video now. All right, so here it is. This is Big Joe on the Council of Foreign Relations. This is on C-SPAN, as you can see, back in 2018. Let's see what he has to say.
I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place.
All right, so that is Joe Biden incriminating himself by saying that he extorted the Ukrainian government to fire this guy, right? So obviously there's some trouble there. For many, even if the alleged $10 million payment didn't happen, it's not acceptable behavior, right? Like, the vice president of the United States has no business dictating to a friend, a partner, who should be their prosecutor, their attorney general, whatever you want to say, right? Like, that's none of our business. And, so it's certainly unethical, even if it isn't corrupt. And then, some of the feedback from Biden and his defenders, his apologists, is that they've claimed that the EU wanted Shokin, this prosecutor, fired. That I'm not sure that's true. There's more recent reporting that indicates this may have not been the case. There's some reviews and reports from both our State Department and some entities in Europe that say, hey, he's doing a fine job. So, yeah. So the next is the FBI in 2019 verified the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop. It took some in the media, like the New York Times and the Washington Post, another 3 years to verify it. But the FBI knew it in 2019. The New York Post got it in 2020, and I'm not going to repeat all of the ways that that information was suppressed for the next 2 years. But subsequent to that, we found an email in which Hunter claimed that, or Hunter was speaking to a Chinese official at that same CEFC, where he said, we're going to save 10% of the deal for the big guy. And Tony Bobulinski has confirmed that the big guy was absolutely Joe Biden. Hunter claimed in an email to one of his partners that Hunter paid half of his income to Joe Biden. That's in the record. Hunter sent a message through WhatsApp to a gentleman named Henry Zhao, chairman of China's Harvest Fund Management. He leveraged his father's presence to demand payment. And the quote from WhatsApp is, I am sitting here with my father, and we would like to understand why the commitment made has not been fulfilled. Tell the director that I would like to resolve this now before it gets out of hand. And now means tonight. So he's demanding money. He's saying his father's sitting there. So why would Joe Biden be aware of this payment? And why would he be involved in collecting such a payment if he wasn't involved at all in the business dealings? And then this one's a newer one. Joe Biden used fictitious email addresses to conduct official business. So this came out a couple of weeks ago. He wasn't always using his official email address. He was conducting state business, the people's business, on these fictitious email addresses. The word is, this is very common, although not cool, right? The purpose of it is to avoid what's called a Freedom of Information request. Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, is where the press or others in the government or in the country can request the government information, like what the heck's going on. And let's be honest, this is our information. This is the people's government. By, and for the people. It's our emails. But Joe Biden and other elites in Washington use fictitious email addresses to try and avoid these sorts of things. They might be doing some shady things when they do that sort of thing, don't you think? And some of these emails were copying official business, and Hunter Biden was copied on his own personal email address. We haven't gotten access to these emails. There's just some reporting that reports those things. So the National Archives is actually protecting this data. And our congressional oversight friends are trying to get it. Next, bank records indicate the Bidens received at least $20 million in payments from foreign entities. One claim puts that figure at over $50 million. There were also numerous, and I forget the term, but where bank records are flagged by the federal government as looking suspicious, either that they're money laundering or they're related to drugs or some other illegal activity, they get marked and they get investigated and reported. That happened all over Hunter Biden's and other Biden family bank accounts. The Bidens, in fact, created at least 20 shell companies that appear to conceal the source of the funds and reduce the conspicuousness of the total amounts made in the Biden bank accounts. And that's a direct quote from the House Oversight Committee. So some shady things going on there. despite all of this evidence that I've just described to you, IRS whistleblowers, the two folks that testified a few weeks ago in Congress, claimed that in their 5-year investigation of Hunter Biden's businesses and taxes, that they were never told of the FBI informant about Burisma and the $10 million payment. They were not allowed to investigate Joe Biden. They were told specifically to leave Hunter's father out of the investigation. At one point, Hunter's lawyers threatened to bring Joe Biden to testify as a threat to national security and the attorney's office. These IRS whistleblowers also said they're not allowed to ask about the big guy, who the big guy was. They had that email, but they weren't allowed to ask about it or pursue that thread of investigation. And David Weiss is now, who is the U.S. attorney that was doing this 5-year investigation and not charging anybody for anything. When these whistleblowers came out, he was named the U.S. attorney. The special prosecutor, Merrick Garland, came out and said, hey, he's going to be the special prosecutor now. And the reason for that is that he was not allowed to bring charges against Biden in particular districts, including California and D.C. So look, does all of this lead to a belief beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law that Joe Biden is guilty of anything? I mean, of course it doesn't. These are just, pieces of evidence that seem to indicate there's something strange going on. And the biggest question of all is, if you want to say there's no evidence and, this is a nothing burger or whatever it is you want to think, explain to me why Joe Biden lied about it. Explain to me why he said, I've never spoken to my son about his business dealings. I've never spoken to him about his business in Ukraine. My son never received any money from any Chinese company. Those were all lies that Joe Biden told. Okay? So I would like an explanation directly from Joe Biden why he lied about these things numerous times if there's absolutely no reason for an investigation. Okay? It's certainly enough for a reasonable person to suspect and to demand a fuller inquiry that gets to the bottom of the potential corruption and quite honestly, bribery. One thing's for sure, though. Any reporter, especially reporters, especially folks that pretend to be by the book, down the middle, just trying to report the news to you, any of them that says there's no evidence that Joe Biden was involved in these things is lying to you purposefully. There's only, I don't pretend to know their motives, but certainly they have hidden motives. They have an agenda, and you should not trust them. And feel free to send them this video. So our next story from thecountry.news, www.thecountry.news. Please go, subscribe, send us some money so we can keep doing this wonderful thing for you, is about bipartisanship. So I was meeting with a new friend, who's in the business, as they say, and we were talking about, let me just explain to you by sharing this with you. In 1787, our leaders had a problem. The Constitutional Convention was underway that summer, and the states could not come up with a solution to how the people would be represented in Congress. Delegates from larger states like Virginia wanted congressional representation based upon population, while smaller states like New Jersey wanted each state to have equal representation. There was a high risk that this issue would end the convention in a stalemate, potentially destroying the effort to strengthen and solidify the federal government into the United States of America. The eminent statesman, though, Roger Sherman from Connecticut, suggested perhaps the greatest compromise in the history of the Republic. We shall have two bodies of Congress, one based on population representation, and the other equal representation among the states. Each state gets 2 senators, right? And this is what a republic is. It's not just a direct democracy. It's not even a representative democracy. You are represented democratically by the House of Representatives. Your state is represented in the Senate. And that's the compromise. Thus, the House of Representatives and the Senate were born. And when folks want to change the Senate, they want to change the Electoral College, they fundamentally misunderstand this huge compromise that is the beginning and the end of this country. No small state will want to participate in a constitution whereby California, New York, Texas, Florida decide everything, right? I mean, California voted, I forget the exact numbers, but it's something like in 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by something like 2 million votes. Well, it was 4 million she won by in California. So everywhere else in the country she lost, but in California she won, right? These are the issues that this great compromise solved for us, okay? And the monumental impact of that compromise that it's had on the country, even to this day, can't really be measured. And it was the birth of bipartisanship for the United States federal government, right? Certainly, there were many compromises made in those early days of the Republic. Some of them good, like this one, I believe. Some of them bad, but necessary, like slavery. But that's a topic for another day. So it was the birth of bipartisanship in the federal government of America. And that word, bipartisanship, is now a dirty word in many political circles. We have become so divided in our politics that any mention of the others, the other party, is met with deep and heartfelt disgust and cynicism. You only need the words to read them, the words libtard or maggot, so many times on Twitter or wherever, before you become numb to the mudslinging. And so when I encounter it on social media, it usually ends the meeting for me. I'm just like, I'm not going to engage with this person anymore. Not because I can't take it. I mean, who cares what some Yahoo I've never met thinks, but because it's important that we raise the level of discourse here in the country. Courtesy, and find Douglas Murray on courtesy. I couldn't ever do it justice the way he does. But courtesy is what binds and keeps society together. And when we are discourteous, when we call each other names for no good reason, or, without profit, I guess is the best way to put it, without, there's not a lot of good reason, I guess I should say. When we do that, though, it doesn't help. It doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the insulter. It certainly doesn't help the insultee, and it doesn't help the country. So we need to focus on compromise with a capital C, the sort of compromise that saved the Constitutional Convention. It's needed almost now as much as it was then. We face major challenges in the country, and the status quo will not sufficiently lead us forward. We must find ways to seek common ground and accept that our way or the highway is no way to govern a thriving, technology-driven republic of 330 million souls. And the truth is that the vast majority of Americans can agree on fundamental outcomes that would benefit everyone in the country. Let's take a shot at it, okay? Let me, stop the video and shoot us a comment or an email at thecountryusa@gmail.com. That's thecountryusa@gmail.com. If you think any of these things I'm about to say you disagree with, fundamentally, you might, sort of have a small disagreement, but I'm willing to bet that you are going to agree with everything that I'm about to say for the most part. 80% rule, okay? We want clean air to breathe, and we want clean water to drink. We want to provide the most efficient sources of energy that could fuel our economy and our innovation while making sure we don't overpollute our beautiful world. We want our economy to provide good-paying jobs for every American and encourage small businesses to grow and to innovate. We want to be free of foreign wars and entanglements that do not serve the interests of the American people. We want to promote peace and prosperity in this country and around the world. We want top-notch health care at reasonable costs. We want the best education for our children without saddling anyone with crushing debt. We want our leaders in Washington, both elected and career, to forgo greed and corruption, to focus on what is best for the American people. We want clean, safe city streets, free of crime and open drug markets. We want to take care of our homeless and mentally ill, struggling to live in a society that has left them behind. We want a pragmatic immigration policy that selects and promotes the best candidates for migration to America. We want to end forever wars and bring most of our troops home to protect the homeland, while protecting our interests abroad. We want to restore and protect the Bill of Rights and to encourage personal authority, agency. The choices I make are mine. And responsibility. Those choices I make, I am responsible for and must pay the costs. So can you disagree with any of that significantly? I really doubt it. And so the difference between us, I'm a right-leaning libertarian. I have many friends that are not, and many of them don't like to hear what I have to say, quite honestly, and I don't blame them, right? To each his own. But the difference between us is solely the methods to achieve those goals that I just stated. It's the only difference. How are we going to do it? Right? These are all, and all of these things that need fixed, they're man-made problems. And we can undo the foolishness, our own foolishness that created them. The old saying, you can't solve a problem at the same level of thinking that you were at when you created it. And that's the truth. And no one, not one political leader or party or faction owns all the answers to these things. So every single person will need to think about this and compromise some of their, beliefs, some of their ideologies, some of their perspective in order for us to move forward and achieve these goals as a country. So I thought it might be interesting to just sort of share with you, some potential compromises that I think we could effect pretty quickly, and that would have serious benefit for the people, for the country. So the first is about war and foreign policies. I think both parties, and you'll see a link, we've got a story up called The War Parties, You and Me on thecountry.news, and both parties are now responsible for these forever wars that have precious little benefit for the American people, including Iraq, Afghanistan, and Ukraine. We must return to the constitutional war powers regime where only Congress can declare war. Imagine what the American people could have accomplished with the $21 trillion that we spent on the war on terror. That's right. From the year 2001 until the year 2021, we spent $21 trillion. We could give every single living American $70,000 instead. That would cost $21 trillion. So me, my wife, and my son live here. We get $210,000. We could build enough nuclear plants to power the nation for free, perhaps in perpetuity, with $21 trillion. We could pay off 2/3 of the national debt. That's kind of sad that it's only 2/3, but it's a big chunk. So anyway, the president must seek permission from the American people's representatives in order to make war. And no deal should be struck with foreign countries. This is another issue, President Obama strikes a deal with Iran, but it's not a treaty. It's just an agreement. And when you do things like that, it's not an agreement with the United States of America. It's an agreement with President Obama. And so Trump comes in and he says, I don't like that agreement, tears it up, right? And what's the real cause of that is we don't sign treaties anymore. We don't get the input from the people's representatives in Congress to agree to such a treaty. So the president and the executive branch should not be making deals with foreign countries or persecuting wars or anything along those lines in terms of foreign policy without input from the people. Okay? And Congress certainly has the constitutional authority to ratify such a treaty. The second one is a balanced budget amendment. Our current budget and economy are completely unsustainable. We're starting to see the long-term effects of this. Huge deficit spending in the form of uncontrolled price increases. In fact, let me show you this. So this is from the Heritage Foundation. This is a data visualization of the costs of some things that have happened since January 2021, which is when Biden took over. Obviously, their point is, hey, Biden. But the real point is, this happens when we, run these huge deficits, and the Treasury has to print money. So look at this. Flour is up 33%. Baby food, 25%. You can see them all here. Poultry, frozen fruit, soup, dairy, ground beef, roasted coffee. They're all up 21 to 33%. And then energy costs. Good grief. Gas and home heating oil and diesel are all up over 50%, with diesel leading the way at 65%. That's at all your trucking. That's every product you receive. It gets shipped using diesel. Propane is up 25%. Electricity is up 21%. So again, we're starting to see the long-term effects of huge deficit spending in the form of uncontrolled price increases. The interest on the debt will be close to $600 billion this year. And this will start to squeeze out any possibility of spending on projects that help Americans. We're just going to, all of our taxes are going to start going to the military, Medicare and Social Security, and the debt. And that's it. We don't have money for anything else without spending more than we have, running up deficits, forcing the Federal Reserve and the Treasury to print more money, making everything cost more, and making your savings disappear and your wages worth less. So even though you're making the same amount, you can actually buy less things. I just saw a study that showed, it was in USA Today, and it showed that the cost of goods and services, the same goods and services for the average American family, has gone up $700 in 2 years. So the same thing you used to buy 2 years ago, all the stuff that you buy just to keep the family running, keep the kids going, all those things, $700 more. Okay? So the interest on the debt is huge. The only way out otherwise is the Fed to continue to print money, right? And thus devaluing the dollar, making the dollar worth less, which makes all hardworking Americans' wages worth less, which makes all of their savings worth less. The squeeze is really real, and everybody is feeling it. Healthcare. Our current healthcare system is likewise completely unsustainable. The left in America wants Medicare for all. We have another story on this on the country.news. It's called 25% of the economy is morbidly obese. So you can check that out at the country.news. But the left in America wants Medicare for all. There's just a big push for that from the Democrats. The right wants a freer market-based system. We should do both. Okay? And the issue with health insurance in America is that most of it is not insurance at all. It's prepayment for goods and services. It's a prepayment for what the insurance company thinks, how many times you go to the doctor or need a specialist or need a test or a lab or a prescription. They have these really fancy guys, mathematicians called actuaries, and they figure out how much of that you're going to need, and then they base your insurance costs based upon all of those costs plus some profit, right? So it's a prepayment for goods and service. You're not actually getting insurance in that sense. Think of it this way. Other insurance policies pay out an indemnity when certain things occur. So like you have car insurance, you get paid when you have a car accident, right? Your roof, you have homeowners insurance. Your roof blows off in a tornado, or God forbid, your house is pushed away by storm surge in a hurricane. These are all random events, sort of force majeure, acts of God that, while they're foreseeable, like they're not impossible that these things could happen, right? They have a very small chance of happening for an individual. And if they do happen on an individual basis, they have huge repercussions in terms of the financial picture, right? And that's why you buy insurance, for these financial emergencies. So let us similarly create a national plan. And look, I don't know exactly what it looks like, whether it's the government fund, just you buy it from the government or you buy it from an insurance company. We certainly need to work on the effects of insurance in the healthcare instance and sort of control costs, and we can talk about that. But basically what I'm saying is, let's have a national plan for catastrophic and major health insurance. Things like the emergency room, you get a disease, you get cancer, you have surgery, you have a heart attack, whatever, right? Like it kicks in for those big, huge expenses. And then everything else, return it to the free market. Okay. The HSAs kind of do this, but the problem is they're such a small part of the marketplace that they're not putting competitive pressure on. Because the other issue with health insurance is the people that pay for it don't see the cost, right? You can't even get a doctor to tell you what the price is of something. The insurance companies are involved, and it seems like it doesn't cost you anything, so you just do the test, even if it's ridiculous fancy, right? So there's a lot of sort of perverse incentives there. And so I'd like to return most of those things to the free market. So if you go to the doctor, you need a prescription, you need a brace because you hurt your knee, or routine services like an x-ray, or go to get your blood tested or whatever. Let's have that be a free market where there's competition for your business, right? Which would force down costs and encourage innovation, just like it has in every industry that we've applied this to, right? If you look at the sort of the different types of industries and what inflation looks like, the less regulated the industry, the lower the inflation is. The more an industry is regulated, like healthcare or education, the higher the inflation is, because there's no market pressures, okay? Or there's less market pressure. We have to also decouple government regulators from for-profit corporations. They're completely captured. I just read the CDC. I mean, the FDA, sorry. The FDA has patents, and they made $4 billion on vaccines last year. Sorry, that's my front door. And so that's a real issue, and we have to hold these folks to account. So we need to decouple those regulators from for-profit corporations. Maybe you can never go to work in that industry if you're a regulator. And I know that sounds sort of authoritarian, but we've got to figure out something. And then, if we did put a lot of these services and these goods into the free market, think of what a company like Amazon or Walmart that's driven down prices tremendously, especially for the poor and working class. What would they be able to do in these markets if we turned off the regulations and allowed them to participate in them? Okay, that's going to drive it down. The other one that I didn't put in the article, but I think is really important, is the cost of malpractice. Our lawyers are out of control, and I need to do some investigation, but I suspect a big reason why our healthcare costs so much more than many other countries is because of the malpractice insurance that hospitals and doctors have to hold, and we need to look at all of those costs and all those figures and make sure that we dial in the right amount of risk, right? Because you should get paid if your doctor makes a mistake. We need to make sure, though, that that's not outrageously out of control, and that the amount that you get paid doesn't drive everybody's health insurance into the stratosphere. So let's look at that. Last one's immigration. No one can spend any time reading about the crisis at the border and the subsequent crises at our major cities, and I wrote about this. It's called Our Country Requires a Border. You can find that on thecountry.news, and not see what we must restore, that we must restore law and order along the U.S.-Mexican border. We should build the wall and stop migrants crossing illegally. Stop them 100%. We must at the same time reform our entire immigration system to select the best and brightest hopefuls to join us in the American experiment. And expect those people selected to accomplish certain baseline criteria. It should be hard. It should be like getting into a college that you really want to go to, or making a football team. And I know those are sort of basic examples, but that's what it should be like. We want the best of the best, and you should have to earn it. You should have to get a job and keep off of all of the welfare programs. You should have to learn to read and write English and pass a citizenship test, which I know you do to become a citizen, but I think to enter this country. And it should be a challenge to get in America and join us as a citizen. Then only the most dedicated, bright, and talented people can complete. So fixing these four major issues would go a long way to improving Americans' lives here. And it would also force us to do the hard work and create a framework to continue to solve other issues in this manner. And the point I'll make finally about this is about abortion, right? Like, we're still fighting about abortion in America. And Andrew Sullivan wrote a column on the Dishcast. It's months ago. It might even have been last year when Dobbs passed. When Roe v. Wade was overturned. He said, look, just about every European country has a law in place. It's between 15 and 20 week limit on abortion, and that's it. They did it decades ago, and they never argue about it anymore. It's a wedge issue here that needs to be solved. Both sides of the political spectrum use this issue to get out the vote, get people jazzed and upset and energized and all those things. And we just need to stop them. We need to take that tool out of their toolbox. The Republicans, the right, they're anywhere from 0 to 20 weeks. The folks on the left, Roe v. Wade was about 26 week ban, third trimester. I think it's about 26 weeks. All the way up, some of them just won't say they're for any ban at any time, so you go all the way up to 40. So we got 0 to 20, we got 26 to 40. They can meet between 20, 25 weeks, and the deal's done, and put in some protections after for, serious issues or consequences, and let's stop debating this. Let's just put it away. All done. Okay? And, doing things like that will start us on the path to doing it more and more and building this muscle that allows us to compromise and solve challenges and help each other and do what government was intended to do, which is build this great nation even further, even faster, even better. Okay? So hopefully you can agree to some of these. We'd love to hear from you about it at the country. All right, so our next story is about the UAW, and they're about to strike here. Let's go ahead and play some of this interview from CNBC with the leader of the UAW. So let's go ahead and get that started, and then we'll comment. So I think this guy, Sean Fain, he's pretty good, man, and he's making a great point for the country. You know what I'm saying? And it's funny because I grew up as a very right-leaning Republican. I've softened a lot. I'm sort of more of a libertarian now, but I would have never 20 years ago thought that I'd agree with a union member or the leader of the UAW. But man, he's bringing it. And I was listening to Breaking Points this morning, and they brought up a really good point, which is, when the car companies just about went out of business, they were bailed out by the government, but they were also bailed out by the unions. The unions took some major concessions. They gave up the health care plans they were on. They took some wage increase cuts. And there were some other things. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but it was to save, especially GM and Chrysler. Ford didn't participate in the bailout, so I'm not sure there. But the point is that these workers, sacrificed at that time. And then Fain comes along and he's like, look, man, the last couple of years they've been making record profits. CEO pay's gone up 40%. The cost of cars has gone up 30-something percent over the past 4 years, but we haven't gotten one raise. So we want our 40% of that. Now, the interesting thing is I didn't ever hear from him what that 40% would cost the car makers. Hopefully it's less than the profits we're talking about. And if it is, I'm 100% for it. But that strike is scheduled to start tonight. The interesting thing with manufacturing strikes in general is it's not as impactful as like the UPS one or that almost happened, or like a rail worker strike, right? Like if UPS strikes, nobody's getting packages the next day. With cars, it takes a longer time because they've already delivered a bunch of cars that haven't been sold yet. So it'll be, and I don't know what the inventory run rate is, but it'll be a month or 2 or 3 before this really starts to impact folks. And, the other point that was made, which I thought was brilliant, is, you look at the nature of an internal combustion engine and how complicated it is and all the parts that have to go in it. Then compare that to an electric vehicle, which is where everybody's going, and it's night and day. It's a battery and 4 wheels, as opposed to, these thousands of parts that go into a combustion engine. They're going to lose workers. And they see that, and they understand that. And so I think maybe for the first time ever in my life, I'm down with the UAW, man. Let's do it. These fat cats, they need their comeuppance. So let's go ahead and just take care of business there. All right, 2 more quick things. The first is back to the lab leak theory. Man, this thing is unraveling every day, or every week it seems. So the CIA, we've got some whistleblowers now. This is on the New York Post. CIA tried to pay off analysts to bury findings that COVID lab leak was likely, says a whistleblower. So the Central Intelligence Agency offered to pay off analysts in order to bury their findings that COVID-19 most likely leaked from a lab in Wuhan, China. New whistleblower testimony to Congress alleges. A senior level CIA officer told House committee leaders that his agency tried to pay off 6 analysts who found SARS-CoV-2 likely originated in a Wuhan lab if they changed their position and said the virus jumped from animals to humans, according to a letter sent Tuesday to CIA Director William Burns. Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic Chairman Brad Wenstrup, he's a Republican from Ohio, and Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence Chairman Mike Turner, a Republican from Ohio as well, requested all documents, communications, and pay info from the CIA's COVID discovery team by September 26th. Quote, according to the whistleblower, at the end of its review, 6 of the 7 members of the team believed the intelligence and science were sufficient to make a low-confidence assessment that COVID-19 originated from a laboratory in Wuhan, China. The 7th member of the team, who also happened to be the most senior, was the lone officer to believe COVID-19 originated through zoonosis, or through wild evolution. The whistleblower further contends that to come to the eventual public determination of uncertainty, the other 6 members were given a significant monetary incentive to change their position, and that the analysts were experienced officers with significant scientific expertise. So here we go again, right? Like, remember everybody said, hey, every government agency that's looked into this until, I don't know, maybe a year ago when the FBI started disagreeing, thinks it's a naturally occurring thing. So, it begs the question, why is the CIA paying people to lie about this? Have you wondered that? And, look, I'm speculating here. I don't have any proof that this is true, but there are some dots out there that we can connect, okay? We know that Anthony Fauci was prohibited by the Obama administration to do gain-of-function research, and it allegedly stopped. We know that it allegedly started again in right after the Trump administration took over because of all the uncertainty and sort of perhaps poor management by the Trump administration. And it started again in late 2016 or early 2017. We know that Fauci himself, we have the emails now. He knows that they were researching gain-of-function things in Wuhan. We know that he funded that lab. And so the question becomes why? And the question becomes, why does the CIA want to cover this up? And my speculation is that the CIA was either employing or generally paying Mr. Fauci to develop bioweapons. and they need to sweep this under the rug. So, it's a sad day if that's true, but at this point, none of it would surprise me.
I hear it catches up with you. Pretty soon they'll be begging you to support this and that and give it all away. But we'll stay in the country. Now eyes watch what we do. The end to carefreeness for fear of the news. Listen, can you hear him saying?